My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm currently a regent. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people.
My name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent. I'm kind of a football fanatic. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans. Hello and welcome back to MagisTalk. I'm Ian Peoples and I'm joined by my co-host and brother Jesuit Dan Finucane. And today we are joined by another special guest in our Meet the Jesuit series, Father David Kiblinger.
And we are excited to introduce you to Father David because he's not only new here to Belize, but he is also new to the priesthood. He was just ordained a couple of months ago in June. And he's here in Belize for his first year of priesthood, and he'll be working as an associate pastor at St. Martin de Porres here in Belize City. So Father David, welcome to the show, welcome to Belize, welcome to the community, just welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been, the welcome has been very warm, the weather has been very warm.
That's right.
Everything's been very warm so far.
Yeah, so Father David, you just got here a week ago. So yeah, besides the warm weather and the warm introductions and welcomes from people, what have been your initial thoughts about Belize or experiences? What's it been like so far?
Well, there are so many new things in my life right now that I'm really just trying to observe and see and figure out where I need to be and what I need to do. But I've been very impressed so far with the multicultural nature of the country. So I've done a couple funerals already since I've been here from different ethnic groups, and just the way that people worship has been really wonderful to see, the great diversity here.
Yeah, tell us, one of those was a Garifuna funeral, and you said there's a special procession that happened. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So when Mass ended, the drumming started, and so there was a walking procession from the church to the graveyard with drumming and different songs and dancing, and there were people that were mourning for sure, especially it was an older man who had passed away, so his sons and daughters were in mourning, but at the same time dancing. So it was a very kind of culturally embedded grieving experience, which I just found really moving.
Mm-hmm. And we tend to begin our interviews with to get a sense of who the Jesuit is. And so can you just tell us about what it was like growing up, and what role did your faith play when you were growing up?
So I'm from the middle of the United States, Missouri, where Dan is from as well. So I'm from a little further south in southeast Missouri, but my family is very Catholic. My parents are very Catholic, and we prayed as a family in the evenings. We went to church every Sunday, every holy day, and you just knew that was the thing to do. And I think I got a good foundation in my faith through that, through my family, but it wasn't something that was really, I would say, my own. I think everybody has to have that experience of maybe not going away, but some experience where you make it your own, and you make it you make Jesus Christ the center of your life. So I had the basis in my family for sure, but it wasn't until college where I made that decision, or the Lord made that decision for me.
That's right.
And was there a particular experience in college that kind of crystallized you taking ownership of your faith, or was it kind of over time in college?
No, very much a moment that I could point to, the hour, the day. So I had been studying abroad in Europe for a semester and was backpacking for the summer after that. And I, through a series of providential events, found myself in Medjugorje, Bosnia, which is one of the a newer but a very popular Marian pilgrimage site in Europe. And all I can say is it's a very, very holy place. And there in a Saturday night perpetual adoration that they have, that thousands of people were at with music playing in 20 different languages. It was this experience of the fullness of the church, and that's when, for me, the switch flipped.
Yeah, and what were you doing where were you studying at in Rome, or in Europe? Where were you centered at?
So I had been traveling in Rome, which is where I met somebody who took me to Medjugorje, but I was actually studying in Budapest, Hungary. I was in a math program there in college.
And that's what you studied in college, in undergrad initially?
Yeah, I had studied math and physics. So both of my parents are engineers, and so I have that sort of analytical math side of my brain that likes to predominate.
And I mean, you've studied physics, math, and you've also studied philosophy and theology at this point. So how do all these disciplines fit together? Or do they? Or how have you seen them come together in your thinking, your life?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because some people will say kind of science and religion are either opposed or they go together. I'm still working out my own sort of thoughts on this matter, but I'm actually not really sure how much overlap there is. I think, the perspective of faith is a perspective that, believes that God is present in creation, and creation is a reflection of God, and that's sort of an added assumption to what scientists are doing. And we can completely legitimately add that assumption, because what we're following, what we're doing in religion and theology is not what the scientist is doing. So I don't think that personally there's a ton of overlap, although others may and have disagreed with me on that.
Yeah, that is a big question, faith and reason, or science and theology, however you want to separate them. Yeah, so and you have done some advanced studies in theology prior to the theology you studied for the priesthood. Can you tell us about what those were? You were at Notre Dame, the University of Notre Dame, correct?
I was at Notre Dame as part of my formation, doing some philosophy studies.
Philosophy.
But before I entered the society, I was actually at Villanova, which is an Augustinian university. So after I had this experience in Medjugorje and started taking my faith more seriously, the issue of vocation came up, and I started thinking about the priesthood, but it wasn't the right time right after my university studies to do that. So I thought, it's not something that's off the table, it's something that I want to discern. What would be a good thing to do for a couple of years to have that space to discern? And so that's when I went to Villanova and did in Philly and did theology studies as a way to kind of transition. And part of, as I said in my previous answer, I don't see a ton of overlap between scientific inquiries and religious inquiries. And part of that is my transition from doing problem sets and math problems all the time to reading a lot in theology was very hard for me. I actually had to learn to read a book closely in that time.
Okay. And so you were considering vocation at Villanova. When did the Jesuits enter the picture, and what led you to finally entering the Society of Jesus?
That's a great question. It's an appropriate question, because today, when we're filming, is August 8th, which is the Feast of St. Dominic. And so I had originally, in undergrad, while I was still in Missouri, reached out to the Dominicans and started discerning with them. And like I said, it wasn't the right time in my life. There were, dating complications at the time. And
we don't know anything about that. That must just be you. Just kidding.
So it was a time when there was a lot of stuff wrapped up together. Mm-hmm. And so when I got the break and moved out to the East Coast and started discerning again, I didn't really feel like returning to the Dominicans, even though I have great respect and love for St. Dominic and the order he founded. But that's when I started looking more into the Jesuits, because I liked the idea of a very strong intellectual formation. Mm-hmm. And then I started learning more about the spirituality of the society and St. Ignatius, our founder, and it was something that I found attractive enough to reach out to the Jesuits at that point.
Was there something in particular about Ignatian spirituality that really kind of, I don't know, captured your imagination?
I think, imaginative prayer, this way of sort of filling out the details in the gospel being just in a way an outline of these stories and very little detail in these stories. And so being able to put yourself in the scene and to observe Jesus and see how he interacts with people, that was something that's very attractive to me, as well as just this focus on seeing God in your day-to-day, being very confident that the Lord's working in our lives, and most of the time we don't see it because we don't pay attention. Mm-hmm. And so just paying attention to that is something that I find very attractive about our spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another Jesuit, another mutual friend, Bill McCormick, who's a deacon. Deacon Bill McCormick said, I remember him saying one day that God's will is not a secret. God's not hiding for us or playing peekaboo, that God is present in our daily lives. And so we have our prayer, the Examine, which is meant to help us see where God is at work in our lives. And we've done a show on the Examine here. So if you're curious, go back. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, you can search the Examine MagisTalk show and it'll pull up. But yeah, so I think that's a huge part of our spirituality is God in the day-to-day. Yeah.
And so you kind of discovered this spirituality and you took the plunge and moved to Louisiana. Mm-hmm. What was that like?
Well, you would know, being a St. Louisan, that the transition from one very humid place to another very humid place, that wasn't too much of a change, but definitely going to a very different culture, Cajun culture in Louisiana, going to a building where we did novitiate that's been there for over 100 years in a very small town. It took a little bit of an adjustment, I guess, but the biggest adjustment was, no phone, no computer, really entering into a silence that I had never experienced before.
And then there's the added challenge of living with people who you didn't choose to live with, mm-hmm. but you're sharing your life with. And that's just a mark of our vocation throughout our lives, is that we enter into these different communities, just like Father David is a new member of our community in Belize. But it's a great experience just to see how different each Jesuit is, our interests, our hobbies, even sometimes ways of praying and things like that. And that can be a challenge and also a grace that we can help each other grow in that sense. So that was one of my challenges during the novitiate.
Yeah, and I think one of the pieces that took me a while, still takes me time to really consider, is the fact that what I don't pray with or haven't had an experience of, there's a gift in having a brother who has had that experience, and that I can experience the diversity of the church just within the 10 people I live with, or the 4 people I live with, or just this panel right here. So I think there's a real grace. I may not have chosen the people I entered with, but I love choosing to continue with them. I think there's something.
Well, I'd also like to maybe add a point to that. I don't know how you guys have experienced formation so far, but for me, I know that there have been periods where certain ways of praying have been, I find, fruitful or easy to enter into, and other times not. Like there's a sort of a rhythm or an evolution in the way we pray, and so even having the men around us who pray in different ways, and the Catholic Church is so great that there's an abundance of spiritualities in the church that it's, I found that, my way of praying shifts through the years, or has so far, and how I pray today probably is not going to be how I pray 5 years from now.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that. I think one of the ways I've experienced it is by growing in a deeper appreciation in maybe more recent years for the Liturgy of the Hours, the Divine Office, which is required of deacons and priests to pray, but is encouraged for men who are studying to become priests to pray as well, because it's going to be a part of our lives. God willing, we get ordained. So that being said, I just want to shift the conversation a little bit. We were talking about the fact that you had lived in a Caribbean culture prior to coming to Belize. Dan and I are regents, so we're in Regency. It's a stage of formation that you have already completed, and you did your Regency in Puerto Rico at Colegio San Ignacio. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience there?
Sure. It was a very rich and complex and consoling and desolating experience. I mean, it was Regency. I don't know if you can relate to that. So a lot of dimensions to that experience. When I got there, so I was teaching 7th and 8th grade at a school that was 7 through 12, or so I guess it's what translating it to
for Belizean standards, it'd be like standard 6 through 4th form, probably.
Okay. Yeah. So I was with the younger kids of that group, and that group has had to do so much, or has experienced, I would say, suffered so much in their time at the school. So they, when they first entered, and my first days there, for about 6 weeks, we didn't have running water in the school because they were in a drought at that time. And so, thank God for rain when that came. But then they had Hurricane Maria come through. I had just left Puerto Rico before Hurricane Maria came through, but I went there 3 weeks after the hurricane passed, and I've never seen devastation like that, just everywhere you look. So there was that. There were government protests that ousted a governor that were on the streets, and then an earthquake, and then the pandemic. And so those boys have experienced more in their 6 years of high school than a lot of us have experienced. But there's a resiliency that I met there. The boys are very resilient. The culture is very resilient and very united. And I got to see that. That was a real grace, a grace of God. Urging people to not give up and to move forward with that. And then I love teaching. I was in the classroom. That was my favorite part.
What were you teaching?
Regency. So I was teaching 7th and 8th grade math.
Okay.
Pre-algebra and algebra. And
you're brave.
It was. I also had the regular classes, so they had honors, advanced, and regular. So I got the regular 7th and 8th grade classes. So I did a lot of after school tutoring for the boys, and some of them, unfortunately, it never really clicked. but some of my favorite students were the ones who would struggle and come to tutoring, and I got to know really well. In fact, one of their mothers just recently reached out to me because he had started basic training in the Navy in Illinois and was asking if I could just write him a letter of support.
Oh, wow.
And so you just, you make those connections that will continue.
Mm-hmm. And no theology in the math classroom, right? You left
I left that to the side.
Okay, you didn't try to explain the Trinity in math terms, 3 and 1 and 1 and 3.
It's just 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1.
Yes, yeah.
That's all you gotta know.
Easy, right? Yeah.
Well, something that I wanted to ask you about, so your dad's a deacon, and I read that he was your vesting deacon, and then he was at your ordination as well, deaconing for the liturgy. And I actually talked to your mom very briefly after the ordination, and she was just so excited that the two of you were up there. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that experience, both of those experiences were like, because that's pretty unique. I don't know of a lot of people who get a chance to have that happen.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's true to an extent, but believe it or not, in my home parish in Missouri, there's another deacon whose son is a priest. So two deacons and son priests from one parish. But you're right, that is rare. The difference was that this other man's son was ordained a priest before he was ordained a deacon. So I was a reverse because I'm a Jesuit and we have a very, very long formation. So, my dad didn't even start his formation until I was in the society for probably 4 years or so, and then was ordained a deacon before me. But yeah, it was just really, it was a special moment. I would say the moment that stands out the most for me was actually my first Mass. So the day after ordination, when my father was deaconing. And so the deacon, right before proclaiming the gospel, comes over to the priest and bows and says, "Your blessing, Father." Yeah, so this is my dad asking for a blessing, going, "Your blessing, Father." You can tell I'm still moved by this. And that just sort of like hit home that this is a new ministry for me. This is a new identity and a new role, and people that I don't feel capable of helping, or capable of being God for, like this, they still are coming to me because I'm a priest.
That's powerful. Just that not a role reversal, but just like an extra level, And I'm wondering, did you help your dad discern a vocation to become a deacon? Was that part of?
Not me. No,
not at all.
Not
Okay.
really.
Yeah.
I mean, he worked with the parish priest. At my home parish.
Okay.
That was probably for the best. I don't think you need to help your help your family. It's like, a doctor shouldn't treat the family member sort of thing.
Yeah, but it is a strange experience. I don't know if you guys have had this experience. Once I entered religious life, my mom started kind of asking me different God questions or things that it just felt like she was kind of seeking maybe, not advice from me, but just sharing things with me that wasn't part of our relationship prior to that. And it was, that was a different experience for me, because of my identity as a religious. It kind of opened up an extra avenue of our relationship that I hadn't experienced before. So you experienced that in a much more palpable, tangible way when your father vowed for that blessing. So that's wonderful. Just so now you've been a priest for 2 months as of this recording, and you've already shared one powerful grace that you've received. What are some other graces that you've received during this time, just this 2 months?
Wow, where do I begin? I think hearing confessions has been a really wonderful experience. I mean, it was something that I was looking forward to, just knowing how much I benefited from that sacrament in my life, and just hearing people who do it so much better than I do. Just a real holiness, a real desire to be close to God and to be reconciled with God. I mean, just kind of being there and seeing that, how God's working, and I'm really just kind of present for it, you know. It's a real privileged space to witness grace, and just knowing that people really unload some heavy things and need a fresh start from time to time, and just being able to provide that, that's a great grace. Saying the Mass, it's gotten me so much more, I guess, connected with the liturgical year. The saint cycle, and knowing that, okay, I need to preach on this stuff, so I need to know what's going on in a way that's much deeper than what I had known previously. And so just learning more about the church, learning more about how the church gives us this beautiful gift of the liturgy, and for it's so rich that I'm learning so much and know now how much I don't know, and look forward to keep on deepening that knowledge of the richness of the church.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing, because I think, I don't know, it certainly has helped me hearing priests, whether they've been priests for 2 months or 20 years, to talk about the sacrament of confession and how much of a grace it is to be on, not the receiving end, but kind of the witness or the companion. Because I think there can be a lot of intimidation. I certainly feel intimidated sometimes going into the confessional, thinking like, man, I don't know if he's heard this before. And kind of a sense of like, we're all in this same boat where we all sin and we all need God's mercy. And so getting to hear, that, priests are not there sitting there like, that is very different. It's a very humbling experience.
For sure.
I think that's moving to hear.
And in a way, like, sometimes intimidating for the priest too. Just because you feel, I don't have great experience obviously in this, but I've had enough experience of people wanting real advice and real just direction, and feeling like I have no idea. So that's why I say a little prayer, be like, Holy Spirit, you got to come through, right? At least make sure that I'm not doing any damage. That's the most part. And then, just make sure that you trust that the grace of the sacrament, that's what's there, that Jesus Christ is the one that's doing the work.
Yeah. Well, taking a look at, so you've been here in Belize a week, and you'll be here for a year. And I'm wondering if you could just tell us, what are you looking forward to during your time here? Or maybe put it a different way, are there things you're hoping that'll happen, or graces you're hoping to receive during your time here in Belize?
I think just becoming comfortable with a new identity, because it's a shift, and I noticed this very shortly after ordination, that people, your interactions with people just have a different sort of feel to it. And knowing how to navigate that, and especially as a very public person now, as a Catholic priest. It's not. I'm not a private person that can ignore what's going on around me. It's you just got to be attentive to the people, even more so, who are around you. So really, I think I'm most looking forward to just getting to know people here. Again, I was introduced in the parish this weekend and got a very, very warm welcome, and just asked people to teach me how to be a priest. And so I think just through repetition of the sacraments and praying with people, I hope to get out and visit people who are shut-ins, people do communion calls. I've done one service of healing and anointing of the sick within Mass, and that's a beautiful sacrament. So I look forward to more of that in a way that strengthened the people that really need it.
Have you learned a little bit of Creole yet?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay, well,
No.
it'll happen. It'll happen. Don't worry. So our viewers, Father David needs to learn some Creole. So
Yes.
Yeah, so
Any tips? Right into these guys, and I'll get them.
Well, good. So usually at the end of episodes, what we've been doing is we ask a question that all three of us answer, but we're going to do something a little different on today's episode, introduce a new way of ending an episode. And it's kind of rooted in something that Pope Francis talks a lot about, building a culture of encounter. And so what we thought we would do is David will ask you first, and then the two of us will answer as well. Where have you encountered God in the people you have been with in the past week?
The moment I would say that most sticks out to me was not at the Garifuna funeral that I did, but the other funeral. It was a a son who passed away, an older man, but was cared for by his quite elderly mother. And she was grieving, but at the graveside, she was leading songs for everybody to sing, and you could just tell that this was her way of praying. I mean, it was a prayer, and she was grieving, but at the same time had just great faith in Jesus to save her son and to. Yeah, I guess console her. And so anyway, I have a image in my mind of her sitting under an umbrella, surrounded by some of her other children, and just closing her eyes and singing.
Ian?
My experience, so I've been away for most of the summer from my ministry at Belize Central Prison at Wagner's Youth Facility. And obviously when I'm away, I think about those guys a lot, and there's a good number of them who are there more or less long term, waiting for their court date and whatnot. But we got some guys in high school, which I'm really thankful for, that we have these young men who are getting their education. And one of those young men, he asked to talk with me one-on-one. It had been a while since I checked in with him. And he just talked about, his desires to grow in his relationship with God, to change his life. But he talked about the temptations that he faced while he was there, and sort of the ways in which his thoughts would go back to sort of the kinds of things that landed him in prison. And he was just saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know why this is, I want to change, but this stuff happens. And it was just a great moment for me to encourage him, to tell him that his desire to change, his desire for that new life, that is God working in his life. And that these other temptations come from a whole range of factors, including habits formed in the past, including a temptation from the evil spirit, right? From all these other sorts of factors, psychology, whatever it may be, and just the challenging environment that he's in. And yet, he has so many of these things kind of stacked against him, but yet he's really clinging to this desire to grow. And I think by asking to pull me aside, it's just a real evidence of the Holy Spirit in his life, right? Of God working in his life, working in his heart, and I'm just so thankful to be the one of the people there to remind him that God is working in your life, that this is God working in your life, and to encourage him to keep going, because our young people, especially our guys who are involved in gangs and who are involved in the streets, they don't receive enough positive encouragement. So much of their lives have been full of the positive encouragement that they get are from people who are doing bad things, right? And so to see that he's still, despite everything, he's still trying to build a better life for himself, and these desires come from his love for his family, for God, for the opportunities he's being given to do school as well. So just saw a real hope there for me, and it was great to experience that kind of right as I returned for the year ahead, to have that experience. So very thankful for that. Dan, I'll throw it over to you.
Sure. So this past week, I gave a couple of people exercise books, little notebooks at the prison, and I knew as soon as I did that there would be many requests. And so there was a guy who I've gotten to know a little bit who said, "Hey, I want to see you," and I was like, "Great, conversation. This is gonna be awesome." And I find him, and he says, "Oh, can I get an exercise book? And I'd like a rosary." And I was like, "All right." So I said, "Well, why don't you come in and we'll get it?" So I said, I'll get you the exercise book later, but here's the rosary now. And he said, "Well, actually, could we talk?" And I was like, "Okay, great." And an hour later, I'd heard his, some of his life story. And, similarly, Ian, to what you were saying, to hear somebody's experience of, neglect, homelessness, addiction, very serious grappling with shame at mistakes that were made as a result of addiction, as a result of having trauma that just never got worked out. But then hearing how God has kind of reached into his life to draw him out of that. And hearing him talk about the way in which, while he's been in prison, God has really kind of just drawn him more and more into who he really is. And, I told him this, and maybe it felt very much like the Spirit kind of moving, but it was just like, I feel like I'm in the presence of holiness right now. I'm hearing about bad things you've done, but that's not what I'm seeing, and it felt like a gift from God to be able to just see this guy for a moment the way God does, as this holy person who has recognized his need for God. And it helped me, because I get hung up on my mistakes, my sins all the time. So to see somebody who's really grappled and wrestled, and has surrendered to God, and does so every day, just very, very meaningful.
Thanks, Dan. And thank you, Father David, for joining us on our show. That's it for today. We want to remind you that if you watch this on Facebook or YouTube, leave us a comment, let us know things that you'd like us to talk about. Dan and I are always sort of brainstorming topics and guests to have on, so if you have guests in mind that you'd like us to interview, let us know. And a couple times in the past week, Dan has had the experience of somebody coming up to him and saying that they watch our show, which is big time for us. So Belize is a small place. If you see Dan or myself or Father David, let him know, or let us know that you watch the show, right? That's a great boost for us, because we love putting this show together, and it's great to hear when to meet people who are watching it on the other side of the screen. So thank you for being with us, and stay safe. We'll see you next week.